I walked into our house and found my husband on the floor, sobbing like the room itself had died. "Who is it?" I asked. "Who died?" He looked up with a face I didn't recognize and said, "Our daughter." And then he said 5 more words that turned my bones to ice. "You didn't know about her. If you've ever had your life rewritten without your consent, keep listening." This is the story of the night I learned my husband had a secret child, how his family helped hide her, and how I tore down the stage they built for his lie. This one burns slow and ends cold. Grief has a smell, warm metal and salt, and something like wet carpet. It hit me at the door, thick in my throat before I saw him. My husband, Mark, was upstairs in the hallway between our bedroom and the guest room we always called the someday nursery, when we were being brave enough to say the quiet want out loud. His back was against the wall, knees up, palms open as if he'd been begging the ceiling for mercy and it had declined. "Who died?" I said, keys still biting into my palm. The house had that after-work temperature stale, too warm in the spots where the sun had sat all afternoon, too cool against the stairs where no light reaches. My name, Amara, was still bright in the mail on the console table downstairs. I had a grocery bag hanging from one wrist, cheap flowers from the corner stand, drooping because I always bring home flowers on Fridays like I will a weekend into softness. It was a Wednesday. He couldn't get the words out at first. His hands went to his face in a way that would have been dramatic if I hadn't known how tightly he manages himself. Mark has always been tidy, not just in the way his closet is color-coded or how he arranges spices alphabetically, tidy with feeling. The man who smiles with his whole face in photos, but looks like a lighthouse when something is actually wrong, bright, steady, fixed. Today there was no lighthouse, there was a wreck. I remember thinking, absurdly, did his mother die? She sends me recipes like they're threats, but she's still a human with a pulse. Did his brother? Did something happen at work? The last time he cried like this was no. He's never cried like this. "Breathe," I said, sitting beside him on the rug that needs vacuuming. "Just breathe with me." We counted to 4 together like you do in an ambulance. 1, 2, 3, 4. Air in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Air out. His shoulders didn't lower, they stuttered. "Who died?" I asked again, the words shaved into whisper. "Our daughter," he said. He could have dropped a bomb. He did. I stared at him so hard my eyes felt dry. "What?" He nodded, a small frantic motion, as if his head was a loose object in an earthquake. "I had Amara. I had a one-night thing, years ago, around the time of my brother's wedding. She got pregnant. She had a girl. His voice banged into the word and came back with a bruise. She died, 5 months old." The floor under me shifted. A sensation like the tilt you get on a ferry when the water decides it doesn't care about your balance. I couldn't even pick a verb. Cheated, lied, lived a second life in the negative space of our marriage. "3rd year," he said, and the phrase clicked into a timeline I'd buried, the year his drinking arrived like a houseguest who didn't knock. The year he came home heavy with other people's sweat and told me his boss didn't get him. The year he fought with his father and his mother and his brother and then stopped speaking to them altogether. The year I cooked bland food because spices set off his heartburn from all the liquor and hidden tears taste like salt anyway. "I didn't." He swallowed. "I didn't tell you because I thought you'd leave. So you let me stay," I said, and it came out flat like a nurse's note, documenting a fall. He looked at me like I'd misunderstood kindness. "No, it was a mistake. I thought it would end there." Then she told me she was pregnant. My family knew. They told me to do the right thing. I panicked. He started to cry again, hard on a breath that turned into a sound I'd never heard from a human being. I visited her a few times. I held her. She had these tiny fingers, and then she got sick. And I wasn't there. And then he didn't finish. He didn't need to. The hallway felt newly built, like a set for a life I didn't remember auditioning for. Behind the guest room door, the paint I'd saved to a Pinterest board was still in a hardware store, stuck in a can. The bed in our room beyond the cracked door looked made by a stranger. In the bathroom, the towel I'd folded that morning hung like proof a woman lives here, whose chores could double as alibas for a crime she didn't commit. "How long have you?" I stopped. How long had he been a father? 5 months. How long had he been a liar? At least 2 years. How long had he been a coward? The length of our marriage, if you measure courage by how much truth you lift. My family, they turned on me. He said it like the tragedy was theirs, not mine. They pressured me, called me names. Mom said I was abandoning blood. Dad said I was a disgrace. I told them to back off and they wouldn't, so I cut them off. Then when the baby, his mouth made the shape of the word died and didn't say it, I lost it. That's when I started drinking. That's why I lost my job. Well, not why, but it was all connected. I didn't know how to tell you. I was ashamed. And then time passed, and it got bigger. The lie. The hole. He looked at me like a man waiting to be sentenced, and gave me the worst gift he had left. "If you leave, I'll understand. I'm done hiding it. I'm done pretending I didn't have a daughter. I did. I loved her. I wasn't there enough. That's my punishment." Punishment. He said it softly, like he was tallying points on a cosmic scoreboard where grief cancels death. I stood up because sitting felt too much like drowning. The hallway wall was cool under my palm. We'd painted it last year on a Sunday. He played old music and made jokes about me being a roller tyrant because I kept catching drips. The memory made a sound like a shell cracking. "We were about to start trying," I said. Each word its own room I had to walk through. We were talking names. We were looking at cribs. "I know," he said. He had the gall to sound tender. "Did you think that would be funny?" I asked. The rage came in like a storm over a flat field, visible for miles, unstoppable. "To name a child with me while a ghost waited in your mouth?" He flinched. No, Amara, please. Say her name," I said. "If you're going to do this, say her name." He looked like I'd asked him to open a grave with his bare hands. "Lila," he whispered. Her name was Lila. Lila. A name I would never say without thinking of betrayal again. A name that will sit inside my mouth like a stone even when I haven't eaten. I tasted it like a bloodied lip. And because I am not the person I was before that sentence, I did not comfort him. I picked up the grocery bag with the flowers that had begun to wilt and set it on the hall table with a gentleness I did not feel. "I'm going to my mother's," I said. "Amara, you will not call me. You will not follow me. You will not tell anyone anything except the truth. If you say the words 'my punishment' to you again, I will throw something and hate myself for missing." He nodded, small. He has a face built for apologies. It's part of what makes him dangerous. In the car, the steering wheel was too big. My hands looked small on it, like a child's in a costume. I drove to my mother's house with the radio off. Streetlights flicked past like heartbeat spikes. At a red light, I imagined a different woman in my passenger seat. The woman I was last Tuesday, saying, "It's okay, he did it because he was sad." That woman and I will never speak again. My mother opened the door in her slippers, hair in a clip, a dish towel over her shoulder like a sash. "You're early," she said. "Which is our family's code for you didn't call first, so something is wrong." I cried then, in her hallway, the way a body cries when it finally believes it can be held. "I'll make tea," she said. Then, after a beat, "Or gin." "Tea," I said. And I told her, not all at once, in loops, in spirals. She listened like a person who doesn't mistake the size of a wound for drama. "I always liked that boy's mother fine," she said. When I finished, "I will not anymore. We didn't tell my father. He's the sort who will turn this into action. drive to Mark's, slam a hand on a table, demand penance. This wasn't about performance. This was about the quiet rearranging of a life. I slept in my old room with the ceiling fan that hums like it knows secrets. I didn't dream. I woke up the next morning with grit between my teeth like I'd been biting the night to keep it from talking. At work, the world refused to pause. Email subject lines didn't read, "Your life is on fire." The espresso machine sputtered, the fluorescent lights buzzed, and my coworker, Megan, asked if my Thursday was also feral. I nodded and did my job with the competence of a person who can thread a needle in an earthquake. At lunch, I sat in my car and made a list because that is how I build a bridge back to my breathing. The top of the paper said, "Facts, not truths. Truths are moral, they shiver. Facts stand there and take it. Mark cheated during our 3rd year. The woman carried the pregnancy to term. The baby, Lila, lived 5 months. Mark visited a few times, held her. His family knew before I did and pressured him to do the right thing. He cut them off. He did not tell me. He's framed his grief as punishment. We were planning to try for a baby. At the bottom, I drew a line and wrote another heading. I will not be the softest surface in this story. The second day, he started texting. The messages came like weather alerts. I'm sorry. I love you. I should have told you. Then she was so small. I threw my phone into the passenger seat like it had hissed. Then, from his mother's number, he'd been blocked. But grief is creative. We can talk, she wrote. We were only protecting family. A phrase like a brick dropped down a well. We were only protecting family. Which family? The one I'm married into, but not of. The one that likes to use blood as a blunt instrument. The one that thinks love means roofing the house over the mess so no one can see the rain come in. I didn't reply. I started a folder instead. I named it Record. When people tear your life, you start sewing. You keep the button that popped off at dinner and the receipt from the night you couldn't eat and the screenshot of the text where a woman says, protecting family, like it's a prayer. On the 3rd day, I stood in the baby aisle at Target and nearly forgot how to breathe. I had come for toothpaste because I couldn't sleep at my mom's house without my own brand, because some habits feel like anchors when the tide rips. I saw a onesie on a hanger shaped like a cloud and imagined a pair of hands I don't know fastening the snaps over a belly I will never kiss. Someone had made a registry for a baby who never needed bigger sizes. I stood there long enough that an employee asked if I needed help, and I wanted to say, "Do you know how to fix a life?" But I just shook my head and went to the toothpaste aisle like a coward or a genius. I can't tell which. That night he sent a longer message. Amara, I want you to know I'm in therapy. I'm making amends. I know I hurt you. I can't change the past. My addictions tried to kill me. I lost my job. You got me help. You stood by me. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to understand. I was afraid of losing you. He keeps using the word afraid like a note he thinks will fix the melody. Fear doesn't undo choices. It explains them. Explanations aren't apologies. They're cover letters. I did not reply. I took a bath in my mother's tub and watched the ceiling fan spin a question mark onto the steam. The water cooled fast. I have never wanted a cigarette in my life. If one had appeared in that room, I might have lit it and held it like a flag of surrender waving at the version of me that still believed in tidy. On the 4th day, I called an attorney, not because I decided to file for divorce, all that paperwork was a fog bank I couldn't drive into yet, but because I needed to hear a professional say my sanity had claws. Betrayal trauma is real, she said. You are not overreacting because he's sad. His grief and your rage can coexist. His timeline is not yours. I wrote it down. I underlined, not. I wrote it again. His timeline is not mine. I met with a therapist who works out of a small office that smells like lemon oil and common sense. She didn't ask why I hadn't known. She asked what it felt like in my body when I imagined staying. Like swallowing glass, I said. She asked what it felt like when I imagined leaving. Like free falling, I said, but with wind in my face. In the evenings, I sat on my mother's porch and listened to the neighborhood kids hopscotch the same squares I used to. A little girl with a ponytail stopped, stared at me and said, "You have sad eyes," out of the mouths of the exceedingly honest. "I won't always," I said. She nodded like she believed me. On the 5th day, I found the obituary. I don't know why I was searching. Compulsion. Jill in HR taught me the term trauma Googling, the thing where you think if you know all the facts your stomach will stop making fists. It doesn't, but I found it anyway. A tiny square in a local paper's website. A name, Lila. A date, 5 months. A picture of a hand wrapped around an adult's finger. No father listed. Survived by her mother, it said. I clicked on the mother's name. There she was, in a tagged photo at a fundraiser in a dress that looks like she has a second job at a marketing agency and a first at staying upright. She had a tired smile and eyes that could lift a car off a stranger if she had to. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. Jealousy ran through me like a fever and then left a bruise. Not because she had him, because she had the truth. And the truth is a kind of power even when it hurts. I don't know when the idea of revenge started. It wasn't a lightning strike, it was a drip. I am not vindictive by nature. I do not relish watching people burn, but I am fundamentally a believer in balance. If a man rewrites the history of his life to make himself the victim of his own choices, the story requires correction. My revenge would not be a Facebook post. No. That would feed him. That would make him the sun again. My revenge would be an eclipse. When I left my mother's porch that night to brush my teeth, I heard the first word of it in my head like a chord. Memorial. Not for him, for her. For the child who lived 5 months without a father's name under survival. For the truth that a man keeps calling his punishment. I fell asleep with a plan beginning to form. The way a bruise blooms slowly, darkly, with the promise of tenderness turning into something you can press and call it. There's a particular humiliation in having to notify people that your life has ruptured. "Hey, can you cover my shift on Saturday? My husband had a secret baby, and I need to chant at the ocean." I told my boss a sanitized version, family emergency. Long story. She is a woman who has survived 2 divorces and a son who thinks cryptocurrency is a personality. She nodded and said, "Take what you need. Document everything. Document everything." The words became a religion. I screenshot texts. I saved voicemails. I wrote dates like I was building a bridge the insurance company would have to walk across before they approved the claim. He tried a new number. He wrote, "Please." He wrote, "I can't lose you too." He wrote, "We're stronger than this." Language is theft. On the 7th day, I asked him for the mother's name, not because I wanted to harass her, because I refused to be the only woman in the story who didn't know the other's existence. He hesitated long enough to insult me. "Why?" He texted. "So I stop imagining she's every woman under 35 with a ponytail," I replied. He sent it. Hannah. Hannah. A name that tastes like bread. I did not contact her. Not yet. Not at all, maybe. Her grief does not owe me anything. But I wrote her name in my notebook in tidy print. Then, next to it, Lila. Then an asterisk I couldn't define. Then, not his story to use. On the 8th day, his mother showed up at my mother's house. Of course she did. The woman has the boundary sense of a raccoon with a lockpick. My mother met her on the porch with a smile that would make a priest reconsider his vows. "We're not doing this," Mom said. "You sent texts saying you hid a child from my daughter for years and called that protecting family. Go protect someone else." His mother tried to cry. The thing about women like her is, they've trained their tears like dogs. They appear on command and sit pretty. He was so lost, she said. We didn't want him to lose Amara. My mother said, he did. Not he might. Not he could. He did. Past tense. A judgment and a blessing. Later I found out his family had known from the beginning. His brother, whose wedding it happened around. His father, who says the word honor like it's a title he holds. Even his aunt with the hair like a helmet and the voice like a trumpet at dawn. They had staged interventions with words like duty and bloodline and legacy. When Mark said no, they pivoted to secrecy, which is just loyalty with its label peeled off. I started spending time in places that feel like truth, not church, not a bar, cemetery. The math of them calms me. Rows, dates, a dash between two numbers that stands for everything you ever were. I walked through and read names until my eyes blurred. Veterans, babies, a stone that said beloved bus driver, another that said he tried, a little section with angels for the ones who didn't stay long. I didn't know where Lila was buried. If she was buried, that wasn't mine to visit. But standing there, I could feel the difference between grief that is owned and grief that is weaponized. One afternoon, at the far edge of the cemetery under a tree that dropped sticky pods, a woman sat on the grass with a thermos and a book. I didn't get close enough to read the name on the stone. She looked up, met my eyes, and did that small nod women do to each other when they have been dragged by life and still put on clean shirts. I nodded back. I went home with dirt on my shoes and a plan growing like a vine. The memorial, it would have to be invisible and undeniable. It would have to change the story without featuring the man who thinks he is the story. I started with a phone call to the community clinic, where my mom volunteers sometimes. Do you have a hardship fund? I asked. For infant care? For NICU families? For formula? For bus passes? For grief counseling? The woman on the line said yes to some, no to others. We always need more, she said, and laughed, the laugh of people who keep pushing the boulder nonetheless. What does it take to name one? I asked, quietly. No plaques, just a line in a ledger that means someone doesn't get turned away today. She told me an amount. It was not small. It was not impossible. I looked at my savings like a body I had to move on my own. I could do it if I gave up the vacation fund and the new couch and the dream of tile in the kitchen. I could do it because there is a difference between buying a new couch and buying a piece of peace. Then I called the library. Do you have a parent support night? I asked. For infant loss? For single parents? For grief? The librarian, who sounded like all the nice teachers I never had, said they had space but no program. We could host, she said. If someone would lead. I called a counselor. I called a breastfeeding support group. I called the woman who runs the meal train Facebook group. With the efficiency of a general, I called my therapist and asked her how to do this without turning it into my entire identity. Make boundaries as part of the plan, she said. Name them before your generosity gets used against you. I wrote, no names online, no interviews, no press, no speeches about Mark, no contact with Hannah, unless she contacts me first. Give, don't grandstand. Make the lie expensive. Meanwhile, he was busy casting himself as a tragic figure on a mountain of his own making. He sent a photo, a baby hand around his finger. I didn't know if I should send this, he wrote. I want you to see. I stared at the screen until it blurred. Then I forwarded it to my record folder with a subject line. Uses grief as currency. I typed back, do not send me photos without consent. This is a violation. Do not involve me in your penance. He wrote, I love you. I wrote, love isn't a fire blanket for arson. He didn't reply. The next week, his family, Remember the raccoon with the lockpick invited me to talk at his aunt's house, the one with the trumpet voice. We can work this out, she said, as if you can untangle a hanging by pulling the knot softer. We're family. I recorded the call, not to post, to remember the exact tone. She said we and family like I was a guest in my own life. I told her this was between me and my husband. She said, you wouldn't understand. You've never lost a child. I held the phone away from my face so I wouldn't scream into it and burn my throat. After I wrote the sentence on a sticky note so I could throw it away ceremonially. You wouldn't understand. You've never lost a child. Because that's the point. They used that child. They used her tiny life and tiny death as a coat to cover their bad decisions. They wore her like protection. They turned her into a story about why lying is compassion, if the right people benefit. And then they wanted me to clap. So I planned the memorial. I called it the Lila line. One line in a ledger at the clinic that said, we say yes, for infant care, formula vouchers, bus passes to the hospital, a therapy session when the panic is more than the chest can bear. I funded the first 6 months, quietly. No plaque. A nurse would know the code. A social worker would know the drawer. On Tuesdays, the clinic receptionist would put out a little bowl of purple ribbons. If you knew, you knew. If you didn't, it looked like decoration. Then I set up the library night. First Thursday, Tiny Lights, we called it, because grief for a small life still shines. I wasn't the host. A counselor was. I was a name on a spreadsheet that made sure the lights were on, the room was warm, and the tea was hot. I delivered boxes of tissues with the efficiency of a general. I told the librarian to send the bill to my P.O. box. I did not attend the first session. This wasn't for me to be seen in. I sat in my car 2 blocks away and watched the door. 8 people went in. 6 left after 90 minutes with red eyes and looser shoulders. 2 stayed late. My revenge felt like a warm room. And because I am not a saint, I did one more thing. I mailed a letter to his parents. Paper, because it makes people sit at a table and tear an envelope open, like it's the past. It said, you kept a child a secret from me for years. You called it protecting family. Starting next month, the clinic will have a fund called the Lila Line. It will help families with infants get what they need, without begging. The library will host a support night called Tiny Lights. You will never use her name to excuse his choices again. If you need to say her name, say it at the clinic, to the receptionist with the purple bowl when you drop off a check. Or don't. Do not contact me unless it is to apologize, not for his affair, for your role in turning a child into a cover story. I did not include a return address. I didn't need them to write back. I needed them to read it out loud to themselves in their kitchen and feel the shape of their values without a laugh track. The plan was moving. It had a pulse. It had rules. It was mine, but plans don't make grief stop rubbing its teeth on your bone. I still woke up at 3 a.m., stamped under the word, Lila. I still imagined Hannah's apartment, full of tiny bottles, and a silence that will always be a little girl-shaped. I still stood in the toothpaste aisle and wanted to scream. I still answered my mother with, I'm okay, when she asked, and we both let the lie sit, because sometimes letting someone rest is kinder than shaking them awake for the truth. On the 13th day, I parked outside his house and watched him come home from work. The porch light came on. He stood in the doorway like a man who expected a dog to run to greet him and remembered, we don't have one. He looked smaller than his story. He looked like the kind of person who would be a better man if there were no audiences anywhere on earth. There are always audiences, even for the quiet. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. A text. This is Hannah. I don't want trouble. I heard you know. I'm sorry you had to find out like that. My heart jumped once, hard, like it had decided and then changed its mind. I stared at the name. I typed and deleted 6 different versions of a paragraph. Then I wrote, "Thank you. I won't bother you. I'm funding a clinic line and a library night. If you ever need them, they're there." 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, "I wish he had told you. I didn't want to be the secret. Thank you for the clinic." I put my forehead on the steering wheel and let my body make whatever sound it needed to. It didn't sound like triumph. It sounded like right. The last thing I did before I drove away was set a boundary with teeth. I texted Mark, "All contact through counsel or email for logistical matters only. No unannounced visits. I will let you know when, if I'm willing to talk about next steps." He wrote, "Please." He wrote, "I love you." He wrote, "Don't do this." I wrote, "I already did." The morning after Hannah's text, I woke up before the sun and sat at my mother's kitchen table with a legal pad, 2 pens, and the kind of clarity that only shows up after you choose yourself once and survive it. I drew 3 columns and labeled them like a builder mapping load-bearing walls: protect, reveal, release. Under protect, I wrote finances, housing, time, story. The lawyer had already set up a temporary separation agreement draft. All I had to do was decide if and when to file. "Get your accounts separated first," she'd warned. "He's not a monster. People do monstrous things when they're drowning." I opened my laptop and moved my direct deposit, opened a new checking account, changed the passwords I'd been too lazy to update. It felt like changing the locks on a house no one had broken into yet. Under reveal, I wrote, "Truth, not spectacle." The Lila line was funded. Tiny Lights had met once and would meet again next week. The point now was calibrating where the truth would land. Not Facebook. Not a screaming match in a driveway. I made a list of exactly 3 conversations I would allow. One with Mark, face-to-face on my terms at a neutral location with a recorder in my pocket. One with his parents in writing, not to invite their opinions but to deliver my terms. And one, this surprised even me, with his brother, the wedding around which it happened, the man who had watched a secret sit at his table and said nothing to the woman pouring the coffee. He did not owe me absolution. He owed me the decency of eye contact. Under release, I wrote, "The house, the plans, the someday nursery, the timeline that belonged to a woman from before." Then I wrote a sentence that felt like a spell. "I will not mother a man to become the father he refuses to be." The turning point wasn't dramatic. It was a phone call to the precinct to reserve a mediation room. Officers use it to de-escalate skirmishes and trade car seats in custody swaps. The sergeant on duty said, "Thursday at 6, and I said yes, and my hands shook after I hung up, because doing the right thing sometimes feels like standing on a cliff and realizing the bridge is behind you, not ahead. I texted Mark, "Thursday, 6 p.m., 3rd Precinct Mediation Room. 1 hour. Logistics and truth. Then counsel." He wrote, "Thank you," as though I had offered him a map and not the last mile of a road he'd had years to walk. I put rules under the time in my notebook. He speaks in statements, not sobs. No my punishment, no weaponized grief. I lead with facts, end with terms. I get to leave if the room tilts. My therapist taught me a trick. When you fear being flooded, bring something to hold in your hands. I chose my grandmother's rosary, not because I am Catholic. I'm not. But because worry beads feel like a spine you can borrow. I wound it around my fingers and practiced my lines out loud in my mother's empty house, then in the car, then at the edge of the parking lot, until my voice stopped sounding like a rehearsal and started sounding like me. Before the meeting, I called his brother Dan. He answered like a man waiting for a dentist to say root canal. "Amara," he said, cautious. "I didn't know." "You knew," I said. "From the beginning." Silence. Then, yes. In that one syllable, I heard a decade of being his brother's best cover. He tried to paste decency on top. I urged him to do the right thing. And when he didn't, I stayed out of it, he said. The coward's lullaby. Then, stay out of this, I said. Except for one thing. He is going to tell you I'm destroying him for leaving. You will not repeat that lie. You will tell him to comply with counsel, to honor the terms, to keep my name out of his mouth, unless he is telling the truth. And you will send your mother a message that says, "Do not contact Amara again." He breathed into the phone like he was hauling something heavy. Okay, he said. Small. Okay. It's funny. Turning points are often the quietest moments in a story. A man who has held your future hostage for years agrees to a 1-hour meeting, and somewhere in your nervous system a switch flips from please to enough. Thursday came, wrapped in late afternoon gold. The precinct smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. An officer led us down a short hall to a small room with a table, 4 chairs, a box of tissues, and a wall clock that ticked like a metronome for hard conversation. I set my phone on the table, recording app open, red light, a tiny lighthouse. Mark sat down across from me and folded his hands like he was a seminar participant. He looked sober, shaved, smaller. "Thank you for meeting," he began. His voice had the varnish of a man who has practiced remorse in mirrors. "I want to. Logistics first," I said. "I speak in statements, not sobs. I've moved my direct deposit to a new account. I'll be staying with my mother for now. The separation agreement draft is in your email. Counsel only from here on for anything not scheduling. If we sell the house, proceeds split after debts. If I keep it, I buy you out after appraisal. Either way, I'm removing my name from your mess." "My mess," he repeated, like a person testing a foreign word. "The secret," I said. "The years, the story you built where your sadness equals my obligation." He swallowed. "I loved her," he said. "Lila." "I don't doubt it," I said. "You can love a child and betray your wife and destroy your marriage at the same time. Humans are talented." He flinched, then regrouped, picking up one of his favorite props, context. "I was lost. My family knew," I said, "and hid it. I mailed them my terms. Here are yours." I slid a single sheet across the table. My hands were steady. "No telling people I left because I couldn't handle your grief. No telling people I'm punishing you by funding the clinic. No using Lila's name to get sympathy. If you speak publicly about what happened, you say I cheated, I kept a child's secret, I lied to my wife, she left. Full stop." He stared at the paper like it had burned him. "You can't police what I say," he murmured. "A last little grab at a lever that used to move me. I can't," I said, "but I can make lying expensive." I tapped the page again, where a second paragraph sat like a promise. "Any violation of these terms triggers a public correction from me through counsel and a matching donation to the Lila line in your name, minimum $500 per incident." He blinked. "A what?" "A consequence," I said. "For the first time in your life, words will cost you." His mouth opened, closed. Anger flickered, the old pilot light. He looked at the recorder, exhaled it away. "You're cruel," he said finally. The irony almost made me laugh. "No," I said, and this is where the plan hardened into something like grace. "I'm done being soft in rooms that use me for cushioning." He cried then, not the theatrical wail from the hallway that first night. A small, precise weeping that made the tissues on the table seem like a prop from the set of Remorse, the mini-series. I did not put my hand on his. I did not reach for the box. I let the clock tick. When he calmed, he asked, like a child asking if summer is over, "Is there anything I can do?" "Yes," I said, and this last piece I hadn't planned until the moment the question hung between us. "Send your first donation to the clinic. Don't tweet it. Don't tell your mother. Don't call it penance. Call it Tuesday. Get a second job if you have to. 6 months. Then make a choice. Become a decent man in the dark, or go live on stages, and leave me out of it." He nodded like a person who wants a map even if he has no intention of using it. "And us?" he asked, almost whispering. There is no us, there is you, and there is me, and there is a small line in a ledger that keeps a light on for a stranger. That's the only we that exists, because of your choices. The officer knocked at 50 times, she said gently, as if she'd been listening and rooting for the woman with the beads around her fingers. We stood. He reached toward me, not to touch me, good instinct, but as if to hold the air between us steady. I'm sorry, he said. It landed like a feather on a scale stacked with iron. I left without looking back. Outside, the evening had gone indigo. In the parking lot, an ambulance idled. Lights off, engine thrumming. I put the rosary in my pocket and felt the outline of each bead rise under the fabric like a row of vertebrae. My back had won again. The next day, his parents' letter arrived. Not an apology, a negotiation disguised as contrition. We understand your pain, it began, which is code for we've measured it and approved. We believe families should heal in private. They offered me casseroles of absolutes if I would agree to stop making a spectacle. I forwarded it to my lawyer with the subject line, "Their theater, not mine," then put the paper in my record folder, and with my mother watching and nodding, set a pot of water to boil and used the steam to loosen the glue so I could repurpose the envelope for a bill. Small thefts from the story they wanted to mail me. By Saturday, the financial accounts were separated, the house appraisal appointment booked, and I had a forwarding address at the post office. I took a trash bag to his house and made my 3 passes through the place like a woman reclaiming a theater after the show closed. Keep, donate, leave. I kept my grandmother's quilt and my books and the plate I bought with my first solo paycheck. I donated the bar cart we assembled in our kinder year and the wine glasses we never used because he drank from tumblers like a man hiding. I left the engagement photos on the wall, a museum exhibit of a version of us that will inform future archaeologists studying the era when women smiled with their teeth while their mouths were full of unsaid. Before I left, I took the list from the fridge, groceries, chores, this week's meal plan, and replaced it with a single sheet of paper that said in black marker, "The truth survives the spin." Not a threat, a weather report. Back at my mother's, I slept for 9 hours without waking up once. In the morning, I made eggs and fed the stray cat who has decided our porch is Switzerland. I watched a video of Tiny Light's second meeting. A librarian had posted a photo of paper lanterns with no faces in it, just hands. The caption read, "For the ones we loved briefly and forever." The comments were quiet and kind. No drama, no spectacle, just a room that existed because I refused to become a stage. That afternoon, Hannah texted me again. "I went to the clinic," she wrote. "They knew the code. Thank you." I typed, "I'm glad." 3 dots. Then he sent money. Another beat. I didn't ask him to. I stared at the message and felt something surprising move under my breastbone. Not forgiveness. Not for him. Relief for her. For the child. For a piece of the world that could have hurt less and now does. By an inch. I realized then that my revenge had turned a corner. It wasn't about watching him burn by the light of the lie. It was about turning the lie into fuel for something that made smoke go up through a chimney instead of fill my lungs. I wrote one more list, just for me. In the release column, I release the version of love that requires me to be endlessly surprised by the worst. I release the house. I release the edges of a future built on an unmarked grave. I release the job of translating cruelty into context. Then, because old habits die loud, I do not release my standards, my peace, or my name. I thought the turning point would feel like applause. It felt like quiet. Better. It felt like a door closing gently in a house I own. Execution day looked ordinary from the outside. That's the trick of strong revenge. It wears normal like a cloak and lets the consequences do the talking. At 9 a.m., my lawyer filed the separation agreement with temporary order. Nothing dramatic, no emergency injunctions or sirens, just paperwork that says this woman is not a prop in your redemption arc. It included the language we negotiated about speech and donation trigger. The clerk, a woman with nails like tiny flags, stamped the papers and said, "Good for you," under her breath, in the tone of people who have watched this movie too many times. At 11 a.m., the clinic posted a staff-only memo reminding everyone of the Lila line refill schedule and the code word at the front desk. The receptionist sent me a photo of the purple ribbon bowl full to the brim and a note, "We'll need more by next week." I drove over with a bag that looked like Easter, threw up in it, and handed it off with a smile that didn't hurt my face. At 1 p.m., a pastel flyer went up in the library vestibule for the Tiny Lights meeting with a line at the bottom that said, "Funded by a gift in memory of Elle, to keep her a person and not a plot twist." I stood a few minutes away and watched a dad stop, rate it, and put his hand on the shoulder of the small boy next to him like he was feeling a pulse. At 3 p.m., my email chimed. A receipt from the clinic. Donation $500. From Anonymous. I didn't have to guess, my lawyer confirmed it later. Mark's first violation had been stupid and small, a self-pitying text to a mutual friend that said, "She's punishing me for grieving." The friend, who enjoys group chats like a sport, sent a screenshot to me with a note, "Do I owe him sympathy or you my silence?" I replied with the template my lawyer wrote, "Please forward the following correction on my behalf." It contained one sentence: "Mark's choices led to our separation. My grief belongs to me." We attached the clause and the donation link. He paid fast. The clause wasn't about taking his money, it was about making honesty cheaper than spin. At 4 p.m., I called his parent. They expected a fight. What they got was a script. "This call is to inform you of the following," I said, my voice a steady river. "I will not be attending family functions. Do not contact me directly. If you speak about me, you will say, 'We hid a child from Amara, we were wrong.' If you cannot say that, say nothing. If you say anything else, my counsel will contact you and the clinic will receive another anonymous donation in your honor. That is all." His mother sputtered. His father tried nobility on and found it didn't fit. I hung up before they could monologue. The silence afterward was not empty. It was clean. At 6 p.m., I met his brother at a coffee shop on the edge of town that does not allow laptops, which forces people to look each other in the face. He was already seated, 2 waters sweating on the table. He looked older than his wedding video, less hair, more honesty. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. The words landed with weight. I thought I was protecting the baby by not blowing up his life. I was a coward. "You didn't deserve to be the last to know. I'm sorry." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. Accountability doesn't fix everything, but it sands the sharpest edges. He stared at his hands. "He's telling people you're crucifying him," he admitted, weary. I told him to stop. "He's trying." "Good," I said. "Let him try in the dark." Dan looked up. "Are you done with him?" I asked. "Yes." The word was cool water. He nodded like a man who has watched his brother drown and finally believes the lifeguard screaming from shore isn't the problem. "If you need anything," he said. And the sentence meant itself. When I stood to leave, the barista caught my eye and said, "Cute earrings." It was not a code. It felt like one. At 7:30 p.m., I drove to the cemetery, not to do anything cinematic. To sit, to mark the day like a stone. A breeze lifted the hair off my neck. Somewhere, a lawnmower droned. I stood among the angels and the dashes, with my palms open, not pleading, just open, and said her name once out loud to the trees, Lila, not because I knew her, because names deserve air. As I walked back to my car, a woman stepped from the path. Hannah, smaller than her photos, bigger than the story. We both stopped, as if someone had said, "Now." "I didn't come to cause trouble," she said. "I know," I said. "I won't make you pick a side," she said, a laugh catching in her throat. "There aren't sides. There's just What happened? We stood there like two countries agreeing on a border after a war. Someone else started. He sent the donation, she said. It paid for a week of formula for a girl who isn't mine. That felt good. It should, I said. She looked at me with that searching gaze of the grief literate. Are you okay? She asked. A question everyone else had asked, like a line from a script. She asked it like a person who knows the answer is the weather, not a thesis. I'm free, I said, then surprised myself by adding, and sad, both at once. Both true. Me too, she said. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out something small, wrapped in tissue paper. You don't have to take it, she added quickly. I made two when I couldn't sleep, and this one wants a home. Inside was a tiny paper lantern, the kind you put a tea light in and watch flicker. On the side, she had drawn a line, just a single wave. For tiny lights, she said. I put it in my palm. It weighed less than a letter and more than a confession. Thank you, I said. We didn't hug, we nodded. We walked in opposite directions, carrying the same day. By 9, the town knew without the town knowing, not gossip, gravity. When people with power stop being protected by performance, the air shifts. A neighbor who had always liked Mark's charm nodded to me at the mailbox and said, Saw the library flyer. That's my boss, who has married and divorced Hope more times than I can count, sent me a calendar invite titled, Half Day. Amara takes a breath. My mother put fresh sheets on the guest bed and didn't comment on the hum that had left my jaw. The fallout came for his family slowly. His mother stopped holding court in the produce section because no one laughed at the right beats. His father started using "we made mistakes" in sentences where he used to say "on." Dan showed up to Tiny Lights with a tray of cookies and stayed in the back, head bowed, which is how penance should look if it's real. And Mark, he did something I hadn't scripted. He disappeared from the stage. No more late-night texts to our mutuals. No more punishment monologues. He sent the clinic money on Thursdays like it was garbage day. Routine, unglamorous, necessary. The first of his 6 months passed. Then the second. I did the unglamorous things too. I met with a realtor. I boxed up the kitchen gadgets we never used. I went to therapy and sat in the chair and learned to let silence sit next to me without filling it with explanation. I bought a second-hand dresser that didn't match my old life and sanded it in my mother's garage until my forearms ached. I made a playlist called Spine and played it at neighbor-appropriate volume. I got a little stronger. On a Sunday that smelled like rain over hot asphalt, my phone buzzed, an email from counsel. He signed. Attached was the fully executed separation agreement. No flourish, no note, just a signature that meant, I will live without you and you will live without me, and the only thing we owe each other now is the truth. I printed it and slid it into my record binder behind the drawing I'd made on the first awful night, a line down the center of a page labeled Before and After. The binder had weight now, not the weight of a burden. The weight of a book you choose to carry. A week later, I stood at the back of the library during Tiny Lights, just for a minute, just to see. The room hummed. A facilitator guided a breathing exercise. Someone cried softly. Someone laughed the laugh of a person who cannot believe she just used a joke to keep her lungs moving. On a side table, a small row of paper lanterns flickered. One had a single drawn wave. On my way out, I passed a bulletin board with flyers for yoga, taxes, and a lost cat named Mr. Pickle. Tucked in the corner was a 4x6 photo of a purple ribbon bowl with a handwritten caption. The Lila line says yes, no names, no performances, just a line. The last thread to cut was the house. On closing day, I walked through empty rooms and thanked exactly one of them. The someday nursery. Not for what it would never be, but for what it taught me about wanting out loud. I unscrewed the vent cover in the hallway and took out the thing I had hidden there years ago. a small box with our wedding vows written on index cards. I read mine, calm as a judge, and slid the cards into the trash bag. On my way out, I put the truth survives the spin sheet in the recycling bin. It had done its job. Outside, the realtor handed me a folder. The keys clinked and the sky opened, the way it does in summer when it decides to be dramatic. I stood in the rain and let it soak my hair until it ran into my mouth and tasted like pennies and relief. That night, my mother and I ate takeout on the floor of my new apartment. Small, sun-blessed, mine. A box fan pushed humid air around like an overworked stagehand. We lit the little paper lantern on the windowsill. It wobbled slightly in the fan's current and steadied, a tiny light holding its line. We didn't talk about him. We didn't talk about her. We sat quietly while the room learned our names. The last message I sent to Mark was short. Receipt attached. 6 months completed. Thank you for paying what words are worth. Do not contact me again unless through counsel for legal closure. He wrote back, I hope you find peace. For once the sentence landed without sticking to me. The final fallout wasn't fireworks. It was mornings where my first thought wasn't a name I didn't know. It was an inbox without an apology tour. It was a town where a man's story didn't get to be the weather. It was a clinic drawer with a line in it that meant a woman didn't have to beg today. It was a library room with small lights. It was a bathroom mirror that reflected a woman who wasn't auditioning for the role of understanding wife. It was a spine. I once thought revenge meant watching someone who hurt you suffer in as vivid a color as they painted on your walls. It turns out, the most devastating revenge is living a life where their favorite shade, shame, doesn't match any of your rooms. My house has different light now. He told me our marriage could survive if I learned to treat his grief like a tax I owed. I refused. I didn't burn his life down. I removed the fuel. Every time he tried to spend her name like currency, it cost him. Every time his family reached for their favorite prop, protecting family, the only place to put it was a clinic drawer that said yes to somebody else. That's justice, not spectacle. Balance. I won't tell you forgiveness came. It may not. What came is room to breathe, to sleep, to stand over a stove in a new kitchen and stir a pot, and not measure my day against a lie. What came is a ritual on the first Thursday of each month. I walk by the library and look through the window at the paper lanterns. I say a name I never got to know. Not because he used it to excuse himself, but because she existed, because tiny lives deserve big truths, because the line in the ledger is a better memorial than a polished story. When people ask how I'm doing, I say, light. When they ask how I did it, I say, I priced the lie and used the money to build a room where no one performs. And when they ask quietly, would you do it again? I don't hesitate. Yes. Every time, 1,000 times, until the bowl of purple ribbons is empty and the librarian says, we need more. If you've ever been told to swallow a lie because someone else is hurting, I hope this story hands you a different script. Your boundary isn't cruelty. Sometimes it's the only honest memorial. If this resonated, like and subscribe, and share it with someone who needs proof that the most devastating revenge is a life where the truth doesn't need applause to stand.